Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in. After what seems like a very long while, happy holidays to you all. I hope you had some of them. And also, Happy New Year, because New Year is tomorrow and we'll take yet another hiatus there, come back on Friday, and from there on out, it is back to regularly scheduled programming. But for now, I'm recording this show, so hopefully you get the chance to see this one, but it should be a good one because we are kind of transitioning from fantasy football talk to more out there sports, so to speak. We're talking a lot more about, say, college football, basketball, if there are any fantasy basketball fans out there, and perhaps even hockey. I know the rise in popularity of that particular fantasy sport. So we're going to see a lot of different segments here on the show moving forward into the new year. But for now, we have an exciting Monday show here concerning tonight's Monday Night Football game, Lions 49ers. A lot of interesting debates and storylines concerning this one. And then from there on out, I'm going to be doing a betting preview of all four of these college football playoff quarterfinals, from Ohio State, Oregon, all the way down to Texas, Arizona State. A lot of good stuff going on in the college football world right now, so we'll have you up to date there. But before we get into any of that good stuff, I do want to remind you, consider liking, following, and subscribing to the show and the network if you want more content such as this. And even though the stream is recorded, I will remind you again that you can contribute and interact with the show in many different ways, not just through the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Feature stickers here on YouTube, but also through our website, GSMCpodcast.net, where you can do one of two things: either leave a tip or donation, which is greatly appreciated by all concerned, or leave a question, comment, concern you have about any show here that we do. I greatly appreciate all your input here that makes the show that much better, and it's greatly appreciated by all the other shows as well, because there are a lot of good people at this network doing a lot of good things. But without further ado, let us get into the first segment of the day here. Monday Night Football preview of Lions 49ers, and this is a very bizarre game here, because I could have told you before the season that this Week 17 matchup could have been for the number one seed, for better positioning in the playoffs. But here we are, and this game kind of means nothing right now. And a lot of interesting debates have arisen concerning this game as well, because when we look at the meaning of this one, the Lions, if they win, they go into next week knowing that they just need to win again. If they lose, they go into next week knowing that they just need to win against the Vikings to secure the NFC's number one seed. Whereas the 49ers, surprisingly, win or lose, it doesn't matter to them, because they are officially eliminated from the playoff race. And those words seemingly should not have come out of my mouth, because everyone believed at the start of the season the 49ers would be NFC West favorites to go back to the Super Bowl, and certainly in a game of this magnitude would play with pride and meaning. But now, only one of these teams truly has anything to quote-unquote play for here in Detroit. But here's the interesting thing here. Like I said, no matter win or lose, Detroit still has that chance at the NFC's number one seed. Now, the moral debate here is, do the Lions rest their starters for tonight's game, knowing that a loss doesn't hurt them? Or, under the borderline crazy, shall we say, leadership of Dan Campbell, they just go all in here and try and win both games? Consider this fact, though. 19 Detroit Lions are on the injured reserve list, including a myriad number of them on that very depleted defense. So, a break would be well-deserved for a lot of these players, as it gives them another week to rest on a short week, mind you, and it gives them opportunity to start planning for the playoffs, no matter which seed they get. Because if you do get the NFC's number one seed, home field advantage is great. But if you drop to the 5 seed, it's not necessarily that horrible, but you do have to plan a lot differently for going on the road. Or actually being at home, but having to play an extra week early, for that matter. But for Detroit, I think when we look at the culture and brand this team has built, they really are becoming much like the San Francisco 49ers were. They're trusting draft picks. They're a young, exciting team. And they don't really have these big brand names as superstars to lift their team. They just play as a collective, and the product on the field as a result is impressive. Whereas if you look at everyone around the NFC, I do feel like there are teams. The Eagles just proved it yesterday with two different quarterbacks. Tanner McKee, who had never played a snap in his life, and Kenny Pickett, looking for any chance at rejuvenation in the NFL, played brilliantly, showing that they can go 3 deep if needed at the QB position. Then the Vikings, very impressive win. Yes, kind of letting the Packers creep back into that one, but ultimately tying it up there with that impressive third down catch by Akers. So there are teams in the NFC well designed to take down this Detroit Lions team, but the Lions, what matters to me about them is their collective mindset. No matter who is on that football field, they play for Dan Campbell, they play for their offensive or defensive coordinators, and most ultimately they play for each other. And that's what I love about this team, no matter the challenges they will almost certainly face to get back to at least the NFC Championship on the NFC side of things. Now let's talk about this disappointing 49ers squad, on the other hand. I feel like this 49ers squad was not far off from at least competing for a playoff spot, because this season was about the very minute details, right, for this 49ers squad. Yes, you could talk about the injuries, which were a big deal, and potentially not something as minute as, say, red zone woes or Brock Purdy's decline or things of that nature, but injuries definitely played a major role as to the 49ers' downfall this season. But what I do think a lot of people don't understand with this 49ers team is that when everyone is healthy, sometimes even in that situation, there are so many mouths to feed that it can get complex. And a lot of people thought that during that midpoint of the season, when they were getting a lot of people back, including McCaffrey, that a lot of their woes to start the season would ultimately be amended by McCaffrey's return. That wasn't the case, because I feel like once those little details were ingrained into this team, these negative details that really separated themselves from the rest of the NFC, I feel like that's when the 49ers ultimately couldn't overcome them, no matter who was on the football field. And it's not an indictment of who they are as a football team. They're still an elite football team somewhere in this mess of a season. But it is going to get a lot harder because of the fact that now all of these young players are coming off their rookie contracts, Brock Purdy included, looking for a big deal. And then you have guys, I believe Debo is going to be up. A lot of defensive players are going to be up as well. Guys like Ufanga and Ward. So, for that reason, we could see a lot of movement from San Fran in the offseason. Whether it's good movement or bad movement is going to be determined by these last couple of games. Because if they show heart and pride in these last couple of games, then I do feel like this team certainly has the exoskeleton needed should they lose a couple players in the offseason. But what I think about when I think about the 49ers right now is the little things. And I'm not necessarily certain that this team can overcome a lot of little things should there be a mass exodus. And I don't necessarily think there will be, because they still have the head coach, they still have the GM, and they still have, for the most part, a large core of those players who've got you to this point. But the time is ticking. The window is closing. The NFC is getting better and better. The Vikings, the Eagles, the Commanders even. Both the Seahawks and the Rams are most likely going to end up with better records than you. So, 49ers have to look at themselves squarely in the face here And for the last 2 games this season, try and make amends. Try and play with pride, because that's all you're playing for right now. Whereas the Detroit Lions are just playing to play. That's what I think about the Detroit Lions. They're not playing for any large goal right now. They're playing to play the game of football, which is an interesting concept when you think about it, but it is one that is rooted in the culture that Dan Campbell has built here. And it's a special one. But speaking of betting odds here, looking at Detroit minus 3.5, some might be tempted to take San Fran, and I actually wouldn't be mad at that. But I do think that Detroit does ultimately win this game. Whether or not they cover, I'm not necessarily certain of. But ultimately, I do think that Detroit right now is just playing to play the game of football. And no matter how badly they play, they might have a chance to win. Or how good they play, they might be in a rock fight. So this is going to be an interesting game here. But I have to take Detroit just because I'm not certain the 49ers are going to be willing to ultimately pick up the pieces of the season and try to win these last 2 games, because they might want to reassess themselves over this offseason and try and piece together a team moving forward that can get them back to the pedestal, because clearly they're not that far off, right? It's just that a lot of different circumstances came into play this season, and that's the reason for why they are where they are. But I am taking Detroit in this one. Also, speaking of money line, San Fran is plus 160, Detroit minus 190. Make of that what you will. But we are just about to take a short break here in the show, and coming back is going to be all college football playoffs, starting off with that rematch in the Rose Bowl between Ohio State and Oregon. Should be an interesting matchup. Going to have you covered all things betting right after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.